I know, it sounds unbelievable, but the news are so crazy that I actually started losing hair because of that. That's right. My hair has been falling ever since a few hours ago, since we have gotten the possible hint that 10.2, or also known as the patch coming out in 3 weeks or so, maybe a month, is going to be the last patch of this expansion, at the very least the last major content patch, the one that you assume comes with the new Mythic Plus season, the new raid, the new big part of the story, etc, etc. That is what is the talk of the day for today. Now, this came from a bit of news related to an Augment rune being available in the next patch, but we already had some kind of prequel to that. Over a week ago, we got the news of the Ahead of the Curve mount in the new season. What's weird about that? What was weird about the news of the Ahead of the Curve mount is that it was coming from an item dropping from the last boss, which starts a quest, and then you complete the quest and you get your mount. In this case, is the Embodiment of the Blazing, which is a skin for your renewed Protodrake. What was a hint towards being the last patch of the expansion was the fact that in Shadowlands we got the Leading Motives quest in Sepulchre after defeating the Jailer in the last raid of the expansion. In BFA we got Lost Flight from Nyalota after defeating Nazot as a quest that gave you the mount, and in Legion even we got Blood of a Titan after defeating Argus in Antorus. So that was the first hint towards this one being perhaps the last patch, the last major patch of the expansion, having a quest tied Ahead of the Curve mount. Now we add the other bit of news, which is the one that we are getting the permanent Augment rune available with the coming of the patch. The Dreambound Augment rune will be, as expected, available through Renown. Once you reach 18 Renown, you will be able to get this one as a reward. This is a possible lead towards this one being the last patch of the expansion, because we went through, for example, in Shadowlands with the Eternal Augment rune from Zereth Mortis, from Exalted Rep with the Enlightened in Zereth Mortis. We went through the Lightning Forged Augment rune in BFA. This one was exalted with the Rajani in the last patch also of BFA. Even in Legion, we got the 7.3 patch, which gave you the Augment rune. So basically, we have now at this point the news that the mount is now gonna come from a quest reward from defeating the last boss, just like all of the last raid tiers have been so far in the past few expansions. And now we also have the news of this permanent Augment rune coming in 10.2, while all of the previous permanent Augment runes came in the last patch of the expansion. Now, what are the question marks about this? Obviously, there are the first worries, the fact that the expansion came out last November. We are getting this last patch coming out this November, 1 year later, and we have Blizzard still committed, as far as we know, at releasing one expansion every 2 years. So this means that we would have to have the last patch of the expansion going on for a full year. It would mean we're going back to Siege of Orgrimmar levels of wait before a new patch. And this would be weird, because we haven't gotten in this situation before, in a while, at this point. What is also weird is that Blizzard already tried in Shadowlands to bring us a fated season, right? To kill time before the release of the next expansion, to spice things up a bit in both Mythic Plus and the raid. So it would be weird to have the last patch of the expansion coming out in November and having to wait a full year before the next expansion. We also have, comments from Blizzard developers themselves pointing about how the story wasn't going to be finished. This story centered around the Primalists and the Protodrakes rebelling against the aspects. It wasn't going to be over with 10.2. There was going to be more to be told, and the story would continue after 10.2. So at that point, you have two questions, you have two avenues. Are we simply continuing to have patches in this expansion, just not the major content patches, but more story-driven? So 10.2.5, 10.2.7, or a 10.3 patch, which will continue the story, but not add nearly as much of the same content we are used to for a major patch. Basically similar to what we had in the Fated season of Shadowlands in terms of content. So you continue the story, you add new cutscenes and new developments for the characters, but there is no new added raids, there are no new added dungeons, there is no new zone to go and play in. You just have a Fated season where you add some additional things to the raids. Perhaps you bring back more old dungeons to be part of the Mythic Plus season. Maybe you take all of the favorite dungeons that we have gone through in this expansion and you make the best of in the last season, for example. That definitely feels like it's where the direction is being aimed at. I'm not falling for the bait that 10.2 will be the last patch or major, patch of the expansion. We have been praising Dragonflight for having one of the fastest and more straightforward and periodical expansions in terms of content. We pointed out how basically every couple of months we have been getting a patch. From the release to 10.0.5 with the major balance tuning happening, 10.0.7, 10.1, 10.1.5, 10.1.7, and now 10.2, they have been basically staggered at a 2-ish month gap. So the fact that we're going through this very, very tight and narrow patch cycles, and then we enter 10.2 and Blizzard says, that's it. It's the last patch for the next 12 months. It's not following any logic, basically. I mean, for myself, I would be fine with a new expansion coming earlier, especially as a content creator, right? It's even better. You generate hype faster, you get to talk about new things more often compared to expansions that last 2 years. So I wouldn't even be mad about that. If Blizzard announced 10.2 was going to be the last patch of the expansion, but the next expansion would be coming out in June, fine. I'm not against that. I think it's decent enough of a gap. From November to June is 8 months. You get the last patch to last 4 to 5 months, and then 2 to 3 months of the beta of the next expansion, right? It's decent, it's fine, actually. I would be okay for that. This leads us to the other point that we have read about from Blizzard, talking about the fact that they were experimenting and thinking about continuing storylines through expansions. So far, every expansion we have gotten basically a full reset of what things were going on in the main story, and at best you had the relationships between perhaps a couple of characters within the story continuing through the expansion. Think about Sylvanas and Nathanos and leading the Forsaken, going through from, for example, BFA to Shadowlands, or think about the storyline about Tyrande and the Night Elves and the burning of Teldrassil going on in Shadowlands, continuing in Dragonflight. But the main story would be a complete change, right? Instead, there were talks about this continuation of a main story from one expansion to the next. So obviously, the news about this expansion possibly finishing with Fyrakk as the main big boss would obviously raise the question, what about Iridikron? What about the guy who has been showing himself as being the big bad of the dragons fighting against the aspects, which we basically have not really seen that much. We have gotten the Dawn of the Infinite mega dungeon to give us an alternate reality, an alternate scenario of dealing with him, but besides that, we haven't really gotten to match him yet. So that could also make sense if you wanted to continue the story. You finish this expansion with the main underling, the right-hand man of the big guy, and then you go into the next expansion facing the big guy directly. That would be also making more sense if you wanted to follow the story and continue the story from one expansion to the other. There is, however, one complaint that players have given to this change, regardless of what it is. Whether or not it is this one being the last patch and then having a smaller patch for story-driven content, or the next expansion coming earlier, or the worst case scenario, there is not going to be any patch or nothing else for like a year, the complaint would remain, and that is that you are paying more for less. Because the price of Dragonflight, I think, went up something like $10 compared to... But we are getting one less patch. We are getting, one less raid tier, for example, compared to what we have gotten in the previous expansions. the duration would be shorter, the total amount of content would be smaller. For example, if we do end with 10.2 being the last patch, the last major patch of the expansion, we would have the least amount of bosses, the least amount of raid bosses of any expansion. Dragonflight would go down as the expansion with the smallest amount of raid bosses, for example. And you paid more for this expansion, it costed more. So this could be a legitimate complaint. Whether or not this was a one-off, whether or not Blizzard has further plans as to why they are doing this, or if this might be the new idea. Make you pay more for less, perhaps. I'm not sure. So far, all of this is still conjecture. It's still just for talk, because I'm assuming we are going to know most of this in a few weeks when BlizzCon will come out. BlizzCon will obviously be giving you the news about the new patch, not just 10.2, but what comes after. So you're gonna be getting news on whether or not we're getting new patches, or whether or not we're getting the next expansion directly, etc, etc. So that is going to be clearing up this current debate about what this means, what this data mined news about the new ahead of the curve mount coming from a quest, as well as the new permanent Augment Rune coming in this tier. What will this mean according to Blizzard in terms of the continuation of the patches of this expansion, the timeline of releases of the patches, and of the next expansion as well. For today, this is all we can speculate about. I don't want to go any further with the tinfoil hat theories. We can stop here. I'm also done losing hair over this. I think this was enough of a damage done to my follicles. So we can stop here for today, and I'm going to leave you to your own conjectures and your own conspiracies about what this all means for the continuation of this expansion, as well as the beginning of the next. So for today, we're now leaving each other on this Wednesday. Thanks, of course, as usual, to all of the dear Patreon supporters for the contribution and the help to the growth of the channel, which can, as usual, still be given completely for free. You can like and comment down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. With these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, well, just a few more days of heat. This is supposed to end in about 3 days with the end of this week, and then we are down to finally having some cold.